Good afternoon, folks. I'm Carolyn Spooner, welcoming you to the State Library, where I worked for some 45 years, just retiring last year. Acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and paying our respects to elders past and present. Our tattoo artist Amy Duncan is on her way. Her taxi is running late, so we'll welcome her when she arrives. And hello to the people on the live stream. Our story begins some 65,000 years ago, when the First Nations people told their stories and kept their memories alive in their oral and artistic traditions. They decorate their bodies with ochre for ceremonial occasions and scurify their skin, but tattooing isn't part of their culture. Fast forward to 1769, when Joseph Banks accompanied James Cook on his first journey to the Pacific in the Endeavour, where in Tahiti, Banks wrote a journal entry about the Polynesian practice of tatauing. Banks was the first person ever to record the names and customs of the Pacific Islanders who had marks on their skin. His observations granted the tattoo a place in history. Tahiti, August 1769. I shall now mention their method of painting their bodies, or tatau, as it is called in their language. This they do by inlaying the colour black under their skins in such a manner as to be indelible. Everyone is marked thus in different parts of his body, according maybe to his humour or different circumstances of life. Some have ill-designed figures of men, birds or dogs, but they more generally have a figure Z, either simply, as the women are generally marked with it, on every joint of their fingers and toes, and often around the outside of their feet, or in different figures of it, as squares, circles, crescents, which both sexes have on their arms and legs. In short, they have an infinite diversity of figures in which they place this mark, and some of them, we are told, had significations, but this we never learned to our satisfaction. Their method of doing I will now describe. The black is prepared from the smoke of a kind of oily nuts from the candle nut tree. This is kept in coconut shells and mixed with water occasionally for use. Their instruments for pricking this under the skin are made of bone and shell, the lower part being cut into sharp teeth from 3 to 20, according to the purpose it is to be used for. The teeth are dipped into the black liquor, then driven by quick, sharp blows into the skin. Sounds painful. The sailors in James Cook's crew got the Tahitians to decorate their skin as a memory of their experiences in this strange and foreign culture. They were the first to bring those tatous to popular attention in Europe. A few months later in New Zealand, Joseph Banks also became the first European to report on the Maori facial tattoo. He wrote, "Although it is unsettling, I admire the elegance of these designs." And Sydney Parkinson was the talented artist on board Endeavour. By the end of the 18th century, tattoos were popular amongst sailors, and the British Navy actually registered some patents. A lighthouse, usually with the name of the sailor's hometown, was supposed to bring him luck on the journey. An anchor meant the sailor had crossed the Atlantic. A rigged ship said the sailor had circumnavigated Cape Horn. A turtle showed the sailor had passed the equator, and so on. Of course, tattooing has much earlier origins and is practiced around the world. This is a stone figure from Neolithic China. A 5,000-year-old frozen body found in the Austrian Alps had 57 tattoos. And there's evidence in Egypt of marks on the mummified body of a priestess Hathor, whose stomach was inscribed with parallel lines, perhaps to induce fertility. And Japanese tattoos date back 3,000 years. The first electric tattoo machine was patented in 1891 by an American tattooist, Samuel O'Reilly. It was based on Thomas Edison's autographic electric printing pen, which uses a perforating function. and as this device punctured the paper, a mark was left underneath by its chemical solution. Previously, tattoo artists had been able to perforate the skin about 2 or 3 times a second. O'Reilly's device could perforate the skin at an incredible 50 times per second. Now, I searched for trove for early accounts of tattooing in South Australian newspapers, but the useful ones only date from after 1891, and they're usually quoted from English newspapers, but often things that happened overseas ended up happening later in Australia. The Northern Argus in Clare writes in 1899, "Among the curiosities contained at New Scotland Yard is a big book which records the various marks found on prisoners. This is intended to be used by the police for help in identification in the future." Incidentally, it throws light on tattooing as practiced among the criminal classes. It seems to show that the very people who should be most anxious not to afford the police any assistance in this matter usually provide a great deal of evidence on this subject. It is probable, however, that the man who had the Lord's Prayer inscribed on his back in blue and red had not taken to crime when this was done. Another man carried a private register on his person. There were the words, "I love," on his chest, and after them, in regular order, came 15 sets of initials. This man had been a sailor and evidently had a sweetheart at every port. Fashion has borrowed this mode of decoration, and there is now a craze in smart society for tattooing. The work is of a far finer and more artistic style. It is no longer done with a common sewing needle and some gunpowder. A machine containing a considerable number of fine needles is used to shorten the process and refine this work, and a variety of colours are employed. Quite a number of professors are engaged in inventing designs, and some of the latter are very artistic and quaint. It then gets weird. It is becoming the fashion to tattoo babies almost as soon as they are born, with some distinctive device, which is intended not only to prevent the possibility of substitution, but also to furnish an aid to identification later, if it should become necessary. Blimey, is this about baby snatching? Popularly, tattoos were often associated with the bizarre spectacle of fairground freaks, and many circuses and sideshows eagerly exhibited examples of complete body tattooing. As an example, in 1893 in Adelaide, the tattooed man, Captain Fisher, has attracted a good deal of attention during the last 2 days at Cyclorama Buildings, where he is on exhibition for a short season prior to proceeding to the World's Fair in Chicago. He also gave displays of club swinging and magic. Now, the Cyclorama was built in 1890 in Hindley Street, next to the Grand Coffee Palace, and then it became West's Theatre. Does anybody know if that building is still standing? I wouldn't be surprised if it still is. An even more exotic tattooed person visited Adelaide in February 1913 with the Wonder Exhibition and Circus from Europe, which had a season in Adelaide's exhibition building. The Wonder Exhibition caused a sensation and was described as unique, amusing and instructive. Now, we all know where the exhibition building was, right down the end of North Terrace, sadly demolished. I just thought I'd show you this is what the back of the building looked like. Normally you don't see this view. The most sensational act was the tattooed lady, Madame Wallona Arita, described as a beautiful Hollander. Madame Wallona Arita, who is a member of the Wonder Show Company, is reported to be the most beautiful and artistically tattooed lady in the world. Certainly a glance at the designs that have been worked into Madame's skin bear out the claim. At first sight, the many-coloured pictures she possesses on her body resemble a close-fitting garment, but a closer inspection reveals the beauty of tattooing. Up to the present, however, Madame has only shown the designs on her arms and shoulders and has refrained, through a feeling of delicacy, from exposing the work on her lower limbs, which have been embedded on her outer skin by an artistic hand. One of the pictorial representations is that of the ill-fated Titanic. Pity we can't see the Titanic. Yesterday, Madame held a private exhibition for ladies, and those who were present expressed genuine admiration at the singular beauty of the tattooing. And Madame Wallona features in the W.G. Alma Conjuring Collection in the State Library of Victoria, which incorrectly says she was an Australian. I found a South Australian advertisement in Sport magazine for Hamman Tattooing Studio, complexions and lips permanently and beautifully tattooed, ladies tattooing of highest class specialised. The studio was in the Royal Exchange building in King William Street, which was about where the Commonwealth Bank head office is. There's no mention of tattooists in any of the Sands and McDougall postal directories, although there was a mention of tattoo oil for sale at this time. Hello, Amy, welcome. And there's an article in the Advertiser in 1911, Electric Tattooing, a modern application of art, based on an interview with Mr. H. Marshall, an electric tattooing artist of the English School, in a studio, again, at the Royal Exchange on King William Street. The article begins, "If it was suggested to the average citizen that there could be anything artistic about tattooing, he would probably regard the idea as absurd." But at the end it says, "To have a cupid or a pretty little butterfly artistically tattooed on the arm or shoulder so that it may be displayed for evening wear or covered at will appears to be quite the thing among ladies in certain circles in England." And someone who was having what the ladies were having was Ross Smith, famous for winning the great air race. Maybe for him the butterfly was a symbol of flying free. His attestation paper describes him: age 21, height 5 feet 9, weight 157 pounds, chest 36 inches, complexion fair, eyes green and fair hair. He sounds adorable. Distinctive marks are a vaccination, appendix scar and a tattoo of a butterfly crest on his left arm. And on this photograph taken on the beach in Cairo during the war, you can just about make out the mark. And about this time we learn in the Express and Telegraph that the latest craze among women is to have their pet animals tattooed on their arms, ankles, shoulders or chests. Mr. South, a tattooist, told an interviewer, says a London paper, how he first makes a drawing of the little favourite, which he then transfers to the body of its owner and afterwards tattoos with the aid of electricity into the skin. There is quite a craze for women to have their pets tattooed on their arms, he said. I have done this in the case of horses, dogs, cats, birds and even wild animals such as lions and tigers. I recently tattooed on a woman's shoulder a photograph of her little pet rabbit. It is no uncommon idea to have a lucky pig tattooed on the arm. Both men and women come to me to have lucky pigs designed for them. The next day, a follow-up article appeared in the same paper under the indignant heading, "Where are they going to? Ideas of Women." In these days of competition, the members of the fair sex adopt, says a writer in London Ideas, all manner of schemes whereby they can attract attention. They have been slowly undressing for some time, and we have been wondering when this kind of thing is going to stop. It goes on to the tattoo craze. It appears that some women are not content with the way nature has made them. They want their skins decorated. The article concludes, perhaps the undressing craze and the tattooing craze will combine forces and throw the dressmakers out of their jobs. Maybe the fashionable woman of the near future will do without clothes altogether and have her dress tattooed on her skin. Futurist designs would probably look very well, and they do. Tattoo craze in society, limbs pictured at 50 quid a time, noses toned down, whatever that means. The Daily Herald in 1922 quotes the expert London tattooist George Burchett, and we learn that even King George, in an account from the Daily Herald, King George V had a dragon tattoo. The cost of a butterfly on the arm was £1. Now, George Professor Burchett had to be an interesting dude, so I looked him up. Born in 1872 in the seaside town of Brighton, George was expelled from school at age 12 for tattooing his classmates. He joined the Royal Navy at age 13 and developed his tattooing skills while a deckhand on the training ship HMS Vincent, which is a significant historic ship as it's the last of the sailing ships in the Royal Navy. After absconding from the Navy, he returned to England, where in 1900 he became a full-time tattoo artist in London and became the first star tattooist and a favourite among the wealthy upper class and European royalty. The website All Things Tattoo says he was possibly the first person to use tattooing as a cosmetic procedure on lips and eyebrows. Now, let's look at the State Library collections. I did a subject search for tattoos and found about 60 items. To get the basics, Tattoo History, a source book by Steve Gilbert, gives the history of tattoos all around the world. The upmarket Essay Life magazine ran a story 20 years ago, So Your Daughter Wants to Get Inked. It talks about people taking part in a ritual that they feel is significant and positive to their psyche. The tattoo provides them with a sense of freedom and diversity, highlighting their identity and serving as a point of difference. A South Australian book is Skin Show, The Art and Craft of Tattoo by Chris Wroblewski from 1981, and it features a beautiful Japanese design which started to become known in the 19th century. And what distinguished Japanese tattooing from the typical Western style was that the chosen pattern was carefully considered in relation to the whole body. In fact, the body was regarded as a canvas, and the empty space was as important as the artwork. Chris Wroblewski wrote a later book, modestly called Skin Shows, the Tattoo Bible, and it has some interesting historical tidbits like a tattoo contest and lots of pictures of course, and this is actually a Hindu design. Puncture Kit is another South Australian publication from 2008, and it provides local practical information about how to find a reputable studio and what to consider before getting a tattoo. It also talks about things like tattoo allergies. In the fictional world, there are some novels in the library with a tattoo theme, such as Fiona McGregor's Indelible Ink, where a 59-year-old woman gets a tattoo on a drunken whim, then forms a friendship with the tattooist. She says she had never liked her skin. She lived inside it like a captive. Yet now, finally, here was a mark she had chosen. She had planted her own flag in her own country. There's even a book in the State Library's wonderful children's literature research collection, Our Brother Nick and the Tattooed Gardener, from 1958. Talk the Talk covers the slang of 65 American subcultures. So we find that someone who gets multiple custom tattoos is a collector. Pre-designed tattoos picked from a book are called flash, and a piece is a custom designed tattoo. Do these names still apply, Amy? Yes, she's nodding. The library has more than 10,000 posters. Adelaide Ink was a multimedia exhibition exploring body art with works by fine artists, ink and henna tattooists at Nexus Gallery in the Lion Arts Centre in March 2008 during the Adelaide Festival. Then a year later, there was Custom Culture Weekend at the Highway Hotel with tattoos, bands, kooky art, hot rods and burlesque DJs. Sounds wild. Anybody there? The library also has a collection of theatre programs, such as an American dance troupe performing Monumental, the Holy Body Tattoo, in 2016. The library acquires South Australian vinyl records and CD as part of the requirements of the Legal Deposit section of the Libraries Act. And this one is Form and Emptiness by Funeral Sutra. The cover art is by renowned traditional Japanese tattoo artist Asakusa Horicho. My former colleague, Michael Talbot, told me about a song by Barbara Burnett. Has anybody heard of her? No, I hadn't. What You Gonna Do About My Tattoo? It's worth a listen online if you go into YouTube. Some people get tattoos to mark significant events in their lives or to remember places in their travels. But there's lots of symbolism in standard tattoo designs, as explained in a website, How Stuff Works. Anchors symbolise strength, stability and loyalty. Butterflies symbolise transformation, renewal and resurrection. Are there any Adelaide Crows supporters here? Well, crows have a complex symbolism, representing change, transformation and wisdom. Crows are often depicted as watchful creatures with foresight, symbolising strong vision and the will to thrive. Semicolon tattoos gained popularity as a symbol of support for mental health awareness and resilience. The semicolon represents a sentence that could have ended, but the owner chooses to continue. It serves as a reminder of hope and the power of self-expression and storytelling. Skull tattoos carry multiple meanings, representing death, mortality, and the transient nature of life. They can represent bravery and fearlessness in the face of death. Skull tattoos can also carry personal meanings, such as commemorating a loved one. The library has a delightful book on literary tattoos. It's an American publication, so its examples are American, but it's fun. From Canadian writer Margaret Atwood's poetry book Asparagus is a quote, "Messy love is better than none, I guess. I'm no authority on sane living." Then there's Irish playwright Samuel Beckett's bleak words, "I can't go on, I'll go on." Walt Whitman is a favourite poet and philosopher in America. Here's a portrait of the young poet and as an old man. Then Jack Kerouac from the Beat Generation, shown typing the last lines of his most famous book, On the Road. That's a magnificent one. Some kids' books, Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak and The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. Public libraries also have lots of tattooing books that you can borrow. I did a search for tattoo art and you can see by format on the left that there are 60 books, some e-books, audio books and discs and DVDs. There's a book on Japanese tattooing. And some more interesting titles, New Tattoo Art, Henna Tattooing, How to Draw the Coolest, Most Creative Tattoo Art. And there's a mythical and spiritual tattoo design directory. So good on public libraries. Librarians really do have their fingers on the cultural pulse. There's even a Tattooed Librarians Facebook page. And Cleo, the Muse of History, is on the arm of the State Library's Research Services Manager. The pile of books belongs to Emily, who's the South Australian Engagement Manager for the Library Association of Australia. So, tattooing is alive and well in the State Library. Now there's a Professional Tattooing Association and an Australian Tattooist Guild, and there are tattoo expos. So, now it's time to meet Amy Duncan. Come up. Hello. So, Amy, come here closer. How did you get into tattooing?
I was always an artistic child and knew that I wanted to do something artistic with my life. I've never spoken to a microphone before. Yeah, I definitely knew I was going to be something with doing something with drawing, and it seemed all of the official sort of career guidebooks pushed me towards graphic design or interior design or something like that, and they seemed boring to me. So when I was in school, I did I think it was called a special report or something like that. It was a year-long assignment, a research assignment on a subject of my choosing, and for one reason or another I chose tattooing, and I don't think I was even that excited about it at the time. It was just a sort of an interest, but through researching tattooing for a whole year I got very interested in it. And I bought tattoo magazines and couldn't believe the quality of the stuff I saw in them. And it turned out it was quite a thing that I didn't realize it was. I didn't know anybody with tattoos or anything like that. So it was quite astounding to see that there were people doing really astounding work in that medium, and that got me very interested. And so that was, I think, when I decided that was going to be the thing for me. Yeah.
Wow. And these are another few photographs from Amy's studio. Now, what sort of equipment do you use, and where do you get your inks from? Because I imagine things have changed over the last 20 years.
A lot, yes. I've been tattooing for nearly 20 years now, so I've seen a lot of changes in the industry. And certainly the inks are one of the things that are a really astounding difference. When I first started during my apprenticeship, there was one shade of pink, which was very upsetting to me because pink's my favourite colour, and there was one shade of brown and one shade of purple, and that was it. You had, you know, maybe 2 or 3 shades of green and 2 or 3 shades of blue, but it was a very limited palette. And now, I mean, this is a fraction of what you can buy. I wish I could buy all the colours, but they expire, so I can't buy all of them, or I won't have time to use them all. But there's been a really dramatic shift in the number of different pigments that are available, the safety of the pigments, because that's something that's been honed over the years too, is the capacity for people to design pigments that will stay in the skin and not cause allergic reactions and not fade over time and all those sorts of things. So that's really astounding now as well. There's such an amazing array of colours, and the machines have gotten better. When I first started, we used what were called irons, which were literally made of iron, which made them very fatiguing on your hands, but they were very heavy tattoo machines that operated with a magnetic sort of a function that made the needle go in and out. They were connected to a power supply and a foot switch, so you operated them with your foot, and they were very, very heavy and laborious to use. And now most people use, or a lot of people use anyway, what I use, which is a cordless machine. It has no wires at all. It runs on a rechargeable battery that you can charge with a USB, so very futuristic compared to what I used to use. They have these amazing little hygienic needle cartridges that you clip in the end, rather than what used to be a very laborious... When I first started tattooing, I had to make my own needles with a soldering iron and acupuncture needles that you would purchase in little packets, and you had to solder them in little bundles, and then you had to sterilise them, and then you had to quite laboriously load them into the machine. It was quite a palaver. And now you get these amazing little sterilised, pre-sealed little things that you just pop in, and they're much more hygienic and much more convenient. So it's all changed very dramatically in a lot of very good ways since I first started. So that's very...
Did you bring your little piece of tattooing equipment?
No, I realised because I plug it in to recharge it when I'm not using it, and I totally forgot to
When
bring
I
it.
saw it, I thought it was a black deodorant stick. That's about what it looked like. I couldn't believe that was
Yes,
a bit of
they're
tattooing
small and
equipment.
compact.
Now, you told me an interesting story about the orange ink, and orange is my favourite colour.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so speaking of the companies developing their products over time, there was a colour that came out that all the artists went crazy for a few years ago. It's probably over 10 years ago now, but it was a very popular colour because it was a sort of a rich, like a vibrant peachy sort of colour, like a beautiful orange peach. And everyone loved this colour and used it in everything for a while. It was very, very popular. And it turned out 5 or so years later, it doesn't stay in the skin. And so I had tattooed this poor fellow, who's a fellow local tattoo artist actually, a big flower on his neck in this beautiful peach colour, and he found it excruciatingly painful to have done. And 5 years later, it's just gone. Oh. It's the outline is all still there, but the orange has actually vanished. And I offered to do it again for free, but he's like, I'm not doing it again. It was too painful. Yeah. So sometimes I guess you can't know until some time has passed whether or not these things are going to be what you think they're going to be. So I guess the chemists behind the inks are getting better at their jobs. Most of the inks come from Europe and America, and they're very stringently tested, and you know, they've gotten a lot better at doing all of that now. It was a bit wild when I first started. I'm not sure how much regulation there was around some of that stuff, but that's all. Yeah.
Talking about regulation, do you have to become accredited? Do you have to do some training? And I gathered you trained with some botanical illustrators.
Yeah, well, that came after. So there actually isn't an accreditation for tattoo artists at all in Australia. There are, in some states, they have licenses that you need in order to professionally work or to run a studio, but there's no license in South Australia. I did an apprenticeship, which is what most people would do. I think these days probably there are people who teach themselves over the internet and YouTube and things. I'm not sure. It seems most professions are a bit like that now. There's a lot more opportunities for people to be self-taught now, but the traditional approach was that you acquired an apprenticeship from another professional and you spent time working under their wing until they felt you were, competent to charge money for what you were doing. And so that's what I did. I did a lot of tattoos on my husband, who was my guinea pig for the first 6 months or so. And I was very fortunate to have lots of people. I had been working as a body piercer before I got my apprenticeship, and I had a lot of young people who trusted me with their ears and things, and so a lot of them put up their hands to volunteer for my tattooing services too when I got my apprenticeship. So I was very fortunate to have lots of human canvases to practice on, and hopefully didn't mess too many of them up. But I still have to look at the ones I did on my husband all these years later, and most of them are still okay. So, and you can practice on fruits and things. Some people do that. They tattoo pumpkins or oranges. There's lots of ways to learn how to use the machine. But it is basically just an apprenticeship with another professional, and then they decide when you're ready to work. And really, the only real limitation is you need to be health department approved, but there's no actual qualification for tattooists yet. I don't know if there ever will be.
Yeah. And it looks like you've worked in some of Adelaide and Melbourne's most prestigious studios. So you went interstate.
I did. I apprenticed in Adelaide around 2004 and 5, I think, and then moved to Melbourne in 2009, where I got a job at a place called Chapel Tattoo that's been around for a long time, and that was really fabulous. I got to work with a lot of really reputable artists, and then I moved on to another studio there with some very gifted people that did very large-scale Japanese work and things like that, so that was a real treat to get to work with them in a private studio in Melbourne. And then I started my own studio over there too, which I've now moved back to Adelaide to be closer to family. But I had some really amazing Melbourne is like the place to be a tattoo artist because it's just, there's more clients, there's more shops, there's less bikies. Unfortunately, that is a bit of a thing here that can, unfortunately restrict your opportunities. There is a bit of an association there. But in Victoria, it doesn't really seem to be a thing. So there's more freedom for people to open shops that are more artistic in nature and less, restricted by those factors. So, Melbourne was a really fabulous place to work for probably 12 or 13 years before I moved back home. Yeah.
Wow. I reckon the Collingwood Football Club would be enough to keep several tattooists in business. Have you ever tattooed any sporting things on people? Or
I reckon I did some Port Adelaide tattoos back not long after I apprenticed. I probably did a few of those. But they're actually remarkably hard to do. Those logos with super straight, clean lines, they're actually remarkably hard.
Yeah.
Flowers are very forgiving.
Yeah. And you're clearly interested in botanical and wildlife designs. You almost seem to specialise in them. How did that come about?
That was sort of a happy accident. I had always, when I was younger, felt uncomfortable with tattooing. Was always, there were these specific languages. You had the American traditional with the sailor-style tattoos, swallows and ships and panther heads and these sort of very traditional images. And then you had the Japanese tattooing that was its own language of, it's all to do with sort of Japanese mythology, and there's these beautiful stories involved, but they're not my stories, and so I loved working in that style because it looks amazing, but I always sort of felt like I don't really want to pretend to be Japanese, and I don't really want to do this American stuff, and I didn't want to do the Polynesian or the sort of tribal stuff either. I sort of thought I would love to find my own language to work within that felt honest and relevant to me and my clientele, and so on a completely separate interest, I started taking botanical illustration classes because I was reading lots of books about plants and it was just an interest of mine. And then I think because I was blogging about I just had a personal blog on Blogger, and I was writing about my illustration classes I was doing and how much I was loving it. I was posting pictures of my work, and I guess clients started hearing that I was someone who was a tattooist but had this interest in botanical illustration, so I got people coming to me for their botanical pieces. And so someone came to me and said, I run a coffee shop and I'm a barista and I'd love to get a coffee plant tattooed on me in that botanical style. And I thought, great, so I did that. And someone else came to me and said they were a horticulturalist and worked with these particular trees, and could I do, and so I started getting people coming to me for that. And I'd never intended to sort of mash the two together, but I just found that it fit and it worked really well. And then I felt really good about the work I was doing because it felt honest to me and it felt relevant to the client and personal to them, and it just became my thing. So it was sort of a happy accident, really, that came about. Yeah.
Talking of happy accidents, the reason I found out about Amy is, does anybody watch ABC gardening program? Yeah, on a Friday night. What a fantastic program it is. And lo and behold, some time ago, it featured Amy and talking about her botanical illustrations, which is how I managed to track you down. So it just came across so well. And so it would have brought artistic tattooing to a much wider audience. So I guess what sort of people are coming to you and what sort of designs are they wanting? I presume they're liking your botanical things. Are they mainly younger people?
I actually find, for whatever reason, maybe it's to do with the, I guess, more traditional botanical styling, I mostly tattoo older women. So I would say anywhere between 40 and 60 is actually pretty standard for me. I attract a lot of older women, and sometimes men as well, and sometimes younger women. But I'd say my average client is probably 50. So it's actually kind of fun. It's a different sort of clientele from something that actually I didn't enjoy when I was younger, was tattooing young people who I felt maybe were not ready for the responsibility of getting tattooed. Because unfortunately it is, I actually think 18 is probably a little young, I think people make better decisions later into their 20s than they do when they're teenagers. And I think, I think probably the 18-year-old, age of consent is maybe a little young for tattooing. And so I never ever enjoyed tattooing people where I thought, I just don't feel confident that you're going to love this when you're older. Because you can't be their mum and hold their hand and say, look, now you shouldn't do this. I would do that with really obviously irresponsible things. If somebody wanted their first tattoo on their neck or their hand, I'd say, I'm not doing that. But most of the time, it's not my place to say, I don't think you're going to love this art when you're older, because I don't know. But I got that feeling a bit more with younger people, that I'm just not 100% sure this is forever for you. With older people, that's not so much the case.
I think the guy in Colin from Accounts would call you an ethical tattooist.
I'd hope so. Yeah.
Now, the question everybody's going to want to know is, how many sessions does that tattoo take, and what's a ballpark figure of how much it would cost? Is it by time, or?
Yeah, look, these days tattooists tend to charge their own, there's not as many rules anymore. When I was younger, it was a very standard hourly rate, but now it seems to be people charge what they feel they're worth or what they want to. Like with most art, I guess, it's sort of the value of it is what the artist chooses. I still work by an hourly rate because it seems fair to me to just only charge for the time that I'm working. So as an example, this one with the lotus flowers, that was done in one session. She was pretty tough because the lower back is a painful spot too, but she wanted it done in one go. So I think that was somewhere in the ballpark of 5 hours work. I just saw her again the other day, actually. She's from Melbourne, but she brought her partner in to get his first tattoo as well, which was nice. So they've got a matching pair now. He didn't get the same design. So it certainly is time consuming for the more detailed work. That's actually a fairly simple design compared to a lot that I do. But any realistic sort of work can take quite a significant amount of time. So I know that I've done say entire arms that have been 30, 40 hours work, and I hate to think what that costs if you actually add it all up. People get those done in sessions, so you charge per session, and I have a capped day rate that's $1,000, so that's you don't pay more than that in a day. So if you're getting 8 of those, it adds up. But you do it over time, and it is an investment in You know, it's not something you want to scrimp on, right? So it is going to be there forever, and it's worth doing it properly.
And you're getting an original artwork. You know, you're not getting something from a book. You're getting something that means something to you, and a beautiful original artwork. Is there anything you've advised a client not to do?
Lots of things I'd advise clients not to do. Yeah, look, I'm sure everybody's seen horrible decisions people have made about their bodies, and I definitely try to steer people away from things that I think are horrible ideas. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can refuse work that I find offensive. I would never tattoo things that I think are likely to cause psychological harm to the client or to their families. You know, I see adults with violent imagery tattooed on them, and I think, you know, if you're a parent, or if one day you will be a parent, or if you have to go to a hospital and someone has to work on nurses have to work on your naked body, I sort of think it's not, you know, I don't think I can't see any good reason for people to put things on their bodies that are disturbing, and so, you know, I would flat out refuse to do anything. Nobody asked me for things like that. But I would refuse if somebody did. And I think most tattooists have a policy of, you know, they don't tattoo things like swastikas unless maybe it's on a Hindu and it's a different sort of an association. But, you know, things like that, most people I think would just refuse to do. But there's certainly a whole genre out there of horror tattoo art and things like that. And I would definitely never go down that road, because I just think it doesn't seem like forever art to me. And it doesn't seem like something you want to wear and carry around with you either. It seems like maybe something that belongs in the cinema, you know, rather than on your skin. That's just me.
Now, while we've got Amy here, would anybody like to ask some questions? I've certainly allowed a good 10 minutes for this, so fire away. Oh, yep.
Do you trace an outline on, or you just do it straight?
Now, I'm going to repeat the question for the recording. Do you do a drawing first and then tattoo it, or do you do it straight onto the skin?
Personally, I do plan everything out and have a drawing first. How it usually works is a drawing is done usually quite sort of neatly. I like to have quite neat stencils. I do a sort of a perfect drawing first. I used to do it on tracing paper, and now these days I do it on an iPad, because then you can sort of print it out and it's really nice and sharp. And but I do create an outline first, and then that gets photocopied to the appropriate size for the person's body on the day, and it gets pushed through a stencil machine that spits out a carbon copy in reverse that can then be used as a stencil on the skin, and that gets transferred so you have a perfect outline of what you're doing on the skin, and the person can see how it's going to look before they commit. So they'll be able to see exactly how it fits, and you can make adjustments, so you can rub the whole thing off and start again if you need to. But it is, that's how I work. Sometimes you'll sort of go in and change it with a pen before you start. So, I might just make that leaf a bit longer, or that stem a bit shorter, or add another petal here. And certainly sometimes there's room for freehanding, maybe not an entire piece. Freehanding is how you would refer to people drawing directly on the skin with pen, rather than having a design that's pre-drawn. And lots of artists do freehand, and sometimes I'll do that too, but usually only if it's, like say someone's got a pre-existing design that needs to be worked around, or they've got something that they want to cover up, and it's got to fit underneath the new tattoo. Sometimes you can't stencil something exactly over it, and you'll need to draw it to fit. So, yeah, sometimes designs are drawn directly onto the skin, but I'm someone who likes to plan things, so I prefer to have a stencil in advance and maybe just do small amounts freehand, yeah. But you would never just start on the skin without a guide. I don't think most people would do that anyway. I've certainly never done that. There's always something that you're working, there's always a guide there that you're working on, yeah.
Question up the back? Can you give us your business name?
Yes, so I have my own private studio called Artemisia Custom Tattooing. I don't have any signage or anything, so there's no point in it having a name. Oh, sorry, my business name is called Artemisia Custom Tattooing, but it's just a little private studio. It doesn't have any signage or anything like that. So, I have a website that's just amycduncan.com. That's probably the best place to find me, yeah. Thank you.
What does Artemisia mean? Who is Artemisia?
Yeah, so Artemisia is actually a genus of plants. that mugwort, another, wormwood and things like that are a part of this particular. I just love the name because I collect pictures of the goddess Artemis. She's the goddess of the hunt, and she's always got hunting dogs and a bow and arrow, and she's gorgeous. But I have a few pictures of her up in my studio. But I just like the name Artemisia comes from her, but it's a particular category of plants that often have a little bit of a psychoactive. So wormwood that they use to make absinthe, that's the one, yeah. It's sort of it's got a little bit of psychoactive sort of stuff in it, which is not actually my thing, but I just think it's interesting. So. Anybody else?
Oh, yep.
How long would that tattoo have taken?
Yeah. So how long would this tattoo have taken?
That particular tattoo, I believe, took 3 sessions. It might have been 2. I don't remember now, it was a few years old. I did that back in Melbourne. It was either 2, I think it might have been 2 days. It could have been 3. But certainly long days, it's quite detailed, that one, yeah. So, but I think also she was quite petite, so her arm wasn't huge. So it does depend a bit, but yes, that sort of thing usually in hours, maybe 10 to 15 hours, yeah. Not all at once though.
I bet you were proud of that one, getting
I'm fond of
an
that
owl
one, yeah.
and an echidna in there as well, and a possum.
The echidna was a
Fabulous.
tricky one, yeah. Sometimes the compositions are difficult because they're things that exist in such different spaces, birds live in a different environment from echidnas, and then the flowers, obviously, it's very hard to cram them all together. And they were all chosen by the client. Most of what I do is it's not my ideas that I push on the client, they choose, and I have to then find a way to solve the problem of how to put these different things together. So I was pleased with that one. I think it worked out nicely. Yeah.
So when you were doing the echidna, did you have to do a black background and then do the white over the top?
No, actually, you can't really put light colours over dark. It doesn't really work very well. So once you've got dark in there, it sort of has to stay dark. So you actually have to outline around every single one of those spines and then colour them in, which is quite laborious. Yeah, probably a decent amount of the colouring session was dedicated to that echidna, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Another question over there?
All I was going to ask, is there any parts of the body that you just won't tattoo?
Are there any parts of the body that you wouldn't tattoo?
Theoretically, there might be. I've not been asked to tattoo anything that I had to say no to. Yeah, I don't know how I'd feel if somebody, wanted a tattoo in an intimate area. I'm not really sure, but so far most people want arms and legs and backs and things. So it's not an issue that's ever come up. I've done some. Yeah, I've never done anything too strange. I've got friends in the industry who have been asked to do quite explicit tattoos, sometimes on sex workers and things like that. And hearing their stories, I don't think I'd be comfortable doing those. But they're also not, they're not getting, those are sort of different styles of tattoos. They're not getting the sort of thing that I'm used to doing. So I think I would probably just politely decline if somebody asked for something uncomfortable like that. I don't think I would tattoo someone's face either. I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable with that. Hands and things, depending on the person, yeah.
Yep.
You use a local anaesthetic?
The question is, do you use any anaesthetic at all?
You have to be, I believe, an anaesthetist or a registered nurse to actually use like a local anaesthetic, but there are over-the-counter anaesthetics that we sometimes use. So I'll sometimes use a spray that is quite mild, just to take the edge off a little bit. It works when people have been tattooed for a long time and their skin is raw. It can take the edge off a little bit, but it is an over-the-counter thing you can buy from a chemist. So it wouldn't be legal for us to use anything stronger. Yeah, and sometimes clients will use pre-deadeners like Emla cream. So a sort of but tattooists don't love it when people do that because they can cause a bit of trouble with the process. But that's about all that we would be able to use is those sort of over-the-counter type products. Yeah.
Yep.
How do you handle the issue of copyright? Someone gets an image from the internet and says, I like this or something like this.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That's an interesting question. As a librarian, we deal with copyright all the time. Yeah. How handle it if somebody wants some design that might be copyrighted or belonging to somebody else?
Yes, it's a bit of a minefield in tattooing. You definitely see things tattooed on people that you think, I'm not actually, it's a bit of a grey area, because the image that you've tattooed, obviously, what you've charged for is labour. And so I don't actually know legally if you were to use somebody else's design, if legally what you've done is not a direct copy of it because it's been translated to a different medium. But personally, I wouldn't be comfortable trying it, you know. So, I mean, in the past, a long time ago, people would come in sort of wanting a band logo or something, you know, and I think most tattooists have probably done some of those things before. But I think that's quite different from a custom piece of art or something. I mean, I would never, if somebody came to me with a piece of art from a contemporary artist and said, I'd like you to replicate this, I would want to seek permission from that artist to do that. Same with a photographer or something like that, because I think that's also, in the world of tattooing now, there's a huge amount of photorealism. A lot of people are doing photorealistic animals or celebrity portraits and things like that. And I really do wonder, I don't know if the artists have permission to use the photos, but they are directly replicating them. And obviously they're translating them to a different medium. But I do wonder if, you know, if you're working on a photo of a celebrity, some contemporary photographer took that photo and presumably owns the copyright for it. And so I don't know. I would personally just never really tempt fate by trying it. I'm quite, I can't always take my own reference pictures, but I try to. So for instance, with the little sugar glider in this particular tattoo, I didn't take that photo, but I did modify it. It's not, nothing in here is a direct replica of a photo. It's all sort of been, you know, turned into a new drawing and a new composition. And so you've got no choice but to use reference photos that you haven't taken. If somebody wants a picture of an owl and I've never seen that owl before, you're going to need to rely on other people's pictures. But as far as, yeah, a whole line that is just someone else's photo, copied verbatim, that's quite a different thing, you know. So I'm not actually sure, and I don't know if there have ever been cases of people being pulled up on that, like a tattoo artist being pulled up on, you know, copyright infringement for using somebody else's work. I can certainly say lots of my work's been used by other people. There's some company on the other side of the world selling rugs with one of my paintings on them, and I've given up trying to do anything about it now, but it's rife, yeah.
Has anybody asked you to tattoo their pet on their body?
Yes, I've done a number of pets. Yeah, I don't get asked to do them as much as I would expect, actually, because obviously pets are sort of, you know, there's a little crossover with the natural history world. It's animals. But dogs, sometimes cats. Yeah, fairly common. Occasionally birds and things. But yeah, pet portraits are a whole, they're a whole tattoo artists that just do that. And that's their whole genre, so yeah.
We got any last question? Oh.
You personally have tattoos, and do you follow a particular tattoo artist? So I'm just thinking how I find it enormously difficult to narrow down, you know, what I might like if I was choosing to have a tattoo. And do you have those experiences yourself personally about choosing what you may or you may not? You know?
So the question is, has Amy got any tattoos herself, and how does she go about choosing what it is that she wants?
And which artist?
Yeah.
Or presumably you don't tattoo yourself.
There are a lot of amazing artists out there now, and I don't really have the budget for tattoos anymore. I haven't been tattooed for a few years. I've got 3 little kids at home, and so tattooing isn't really in my family budget right now. But when I was getting tattooed, it's hard to choose. There's so many artists who are amazing, and there are people that you follow. I actually try really hard not to go searching for new people to follow these days, because it's overwhelming. There's so many good artists, and it's not helpful to be constantly comparing yourself to others. And so I try not to spend a huge amount of time looking at other artists' work. But if I did want to get something done, I know there's a whole range of artists out there that I'd love to go get things done by, and who knows if it'll ever happen. But generally, yeah, the pieces I've had in the past have all mostly been done by people I've worked with. So you work in shops and you meet lovely people in the shops where you work, and you naturally want to get tattooed by them, partly because they do nice work, but because they're lovely people, and that's part of the experience too. There's no shortage of amazing tattoo artists who are sort of jerks in person and you don't really want to get tattooed by them. So I'd always rather get tattooed by people that you know, where it's going to be a nice experience. They're trusting them with your body. You sort of want it to be a positive thing. And so a lot of my tattoos are done by friends. Yeah.
Of your own design?
No. No, generally most tattoo artists would trust the artist they're getting work done by to design it for them. Yeah, I think it would be considered a bit of a faux pas for an artist to go to another artist and say, you have to do my design, because it's sort of, it's not impossible, but it's just that it's not really putting trust in the artist to do their job, you know. And so I guess most people would choose an artist they inherently trust to do a beautiful job and let them do their job, because art's a very personal thing, and it's quite hard to copy somebody else's work. So if you have to work to somebody else's design, it can be quite challenging, depending on the piece. Yeah, but everyone prefers to draw their own way, you know. So I've always gone to other people and said, you know, here's roughly what I want, you design it.
So you don't, last question, sorry. So you don't have any botanical designs at all?
I actually don't know. I'd love to get some, but no, I haven't. I mean, I've got some flowers and some fruits and things on me, but they're not in my style. Yeah.
Well, Amy's going to be here for a few more minutes, so if anybody else would like to ask any questions, please come up. So I want to say thank you very much for being here. I've had a lot of fun exploring the world of tattooing, and it's been a great privilege to meet Amy, so thank you so much, Amy, for coming. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. And the next series in Stories from the Stacks is about the wonderful Stan Ostoja-Kotkowski. The library has some of his fabulous futuristic designs. So hope to see you in August. Yep, bye.